Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with host Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please subscribe and share so you never miss an episode. Search for us on your favorite podcast app, or you can find the podcast on jimmyhinton.org and findingahealingplace.com. Please rate our show, subscribe, and share so we can spread the word. If you would like to support us and get exclusive rewards, go to patreon.com/speakingout. Find a tier that best fits you and join as a patron of the podcast. Now let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast with host Jimmy Hinton.
And Jimmy's mom, Clara.
Oh, yeah. And to our patrons who make this podcast possible, we thank you guys.
We sure do.
We have.
Thank you forever and ever and ever.
We do. So we're going to do another checklist. Are my kids safe at home checklist. This one, I think, is particularly hard for a whole host of reasons, but it was hard to come up with a checklist that's practical because home ought to be the place where we're able to let our guard down a little bit, unfortunately, right. And you know from experience that's just not the case. No. Again, these are not comprehensive lists. I know the past episodes have generated a lot of questions that people have had, and really good questions. Mm-hmm. We did not create comprehensive lists for those, and this is not a comprehensive list either. So these are just general
these are more
guidelines.
Guidelines to help us get started with this process, really.
And what I like about it, though, is that I feel like these checklists have generated incredible questions that parents, it's now on the radar of parents, right. And that's actually exciting. So I'm thankful, and I think I'm positive this will do the same. I think this will raise a lot of questions for people, and as it does, talk to people. A lot of questions have come our way. A lot of those questions have gone unanswered, mostly because of just the time crunch. Right. I don't spend a lot of time on social media. And there's no possible way to answer all the comments.
I haven't been able to either, and I apologize for that. I have a queue of several of you
1,000
who have sent questions, and I look at them every day, and I begin to answer some, and then I can't get to the rest, and it bothers me. I'm trying to work my way through, but
yeah, I don't even try anymore. I've just given up.
Right?
I let myself go.
Yeah.
All right, so we're just going to jump right in. Number one, do you limit the number of guests who are in your home? So often abuse survivors talk about uncles or cousins or some kind of a family member or a close family friend who came over often and would sexually molest them. Man, there's this fine line between being hospitable, and you were and still are very hospitable.
I am.
Your home was open. We had friends come over, but it wasn't a free-for-all. There's this fine line between being hospitable and just having your home be complete chaos where you never know.
And I don't know if you noticed that or not at the last gathering we had at my home, where we had quite a few people. If you noticed, I circulated around, and I had a chair, and I positioned it several different ways where I could watch children.
Yeah.
Now, I noticed as soon as I saw a child alone, that was a tip-off to me to keep watching that child. Mm-hmm. That's it. And, if I saw an adult wandering off alone, it's a tip-off. Keep your eyes open. Now, does that mean I suspected anybody that was at my home of doing any ill to a child? No, but it's become common practice that I
because you don't know.
I guard. No, we do not know. We do not. It feels uncomfortable at first to think that way and to really watch. But is the right thing to do, and after a while, it becomes second nature.
Yeah, and it has to.
It does.
But that leads to number two. Why don't you read off number two?
Okay, do you know where those guests are at all times? And that's an important thing. Very, very important when in your home Are guests wandering off into rooms where you're not gathered together?
Mm-hmm.
Are they off in maybe one of the children's bedrooms? You
Right.
know, and they just say, "Well, I just wanted to see what,
I wanted to go see them
yeah,
play what they
yeah,
were playing.
exactly." That's a no-no to me. That's a big, big no-no. Is a big neon sign saying, "Nope, we're gathered here in the living room, or we're sitting at the dining room table. This is where we are, or we're
Mm-hmm.
on the porch. This is where we need to be." Also, I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking, be careful of that parent who likes to take the child to the bathroom for bathroom trips. As you know, that younger children are susceptible to all kinds of abuse very quickly at bathroom time. And that's something that
Yeah.
we need to really be careful
And
about.
playtime. I mean, for that
Playtime,
matter.
too. Yes,
But
for sure.
that brings up a really good point. Abuse happens so fast.
It does, yes.
And I ask people when I do trainings, I ask people to do, and I'll do it here. I tell them to temporarily suspend everything that they think they know about this slow grooming process, because I feel like a lot of times we get that in our mind where it becomes this myth that grooming is always this slow process, and it's this, building trust and all that stuff. That rarely happens, to be honest. In almost every single case that I've ever heard of, it's family friends. It's
And that's exactly
it's
what I
people
was
who are
gonna
already
say, where
trusted.
you're
They
in
don't
and
have
out
to
of
build
each
trust.
other's homes. The
That's
kids
right.
know the person is Uncle Joe or Aunt whoever, or
Right.
it's Grandpa, or it's and the kids know. So there is that automatic trust among family, that unsuspecting
Yeah.
feeling. That it never could. Nothing.
Yeah.
They're safe with
But
this person.
with that said, abuse happens really quickly, and
Right.
in under 30 seconds, a child can be undressed and being forced to perform sexual acts on a peer or an adult. It happens that quick. Abusers, they're not going to sit and take their time and spend 6 hours trying to gain a kid's trust and give them toys and candy. They will walk into another room, and that fast, that abuser will have that child stripped down and will either be
Well,
performing
as
acts or forcing
one
them.
of my friends said, she never shared her abuse. She's an adult, 2 grown children. She's soon to be a grandma. She shared with me that after church, they had this grandfatherly type person come into their home every week. And while her mom and dad were preparing the meal, he would plop her on his lap and be talking to mom and dad
Yep.
while his fingers were up her little dress. And she said, I didn't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
And that continued week after week after week. She shared with no one. She said, I truly was the first person she told. She said,
Yeah.
I have to get this out. But she said, it was horrible. My family loved him.
Yeah.
He was like a family member.
But I think that's another really strong point with this, and I specialize in abuse in plain sight, and as we're talking about this, it's not just people who walk away and have the potential
No.
to isolate kids.
No.
It's when people are sitting right in front of your face. I've lost count of the number of stories. I've probably heard, easily in the last 10 years, I've probably heard 200 stories of family friends or some relative, somebody who was over at the house, and they're at the dinner table. This happens often. They're at the dinner table. This person sits beside the kid, and while they're eating, that person is doing stuff underneath the
right.
table
And
to the
do you
child.
remember when you kids were little? I would often set up a kids table.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have this on my mind, obviously, but that's something.
You just
that
wanted to get
parents-
rid of us.
I did. I told somebody
know.
this morning about that. And that
Why
person just
do we have this? Why do we have this dinner table set up in the middle of the woods, Mom?
because I'm tired.
Why
of
are we all
seeing you
alone?
kids. Yeah. Tired of it. But I did. I would sit kids at your own table. That's a good practice
It
to
is.
do. It is a good, you were not, out of sight,
Yep.
but you were at your own little table. And that's not a bad practice to have,
No.
really.
Yeah,
You know,
and I mean, I would say in cases where you can't monitor constantly, having a separate kids table when you
Yeah.
have guests over is a
Right.
great idea.
It is.
Because it
really is.
eliminates
Yeah.
that immediately.
Exactly.
It eliminates, at least at the dinner table,
Right.
it eliminates the possibility of a child being molested.
The trauma that's caused by those quick actions of molesting a child are, we can't even measure the trauma that a child feels because it's so fast.
And it's right
so-
in front of
it's-
mom and dad.
right,
And in the kid's
and
mind, well,
just-
why aren't they stopping it?
Exactly. And like my friend said, she said, I didn't know what to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that every time he picked me up and sat him on his knee, I knew what was going to happen. And she said, my mom dressed me in pretty little dresses every week for church. And so I knew he was, I knew ahead what was going to happen. So kids can't process this at all. It's so fast, but it sure does have lingering effects.
Yeah. Number 3, excuse me, do you monitor your children's activities, including internet?
Right.
And I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on internet because that's going to be the next episode. Are your kids safe on the internet checklist? But I will say, like, monitoring your kids' activities, both physical activities and internet, constantly monitoring is so important. Peer-to-peer abuse, even among siblings, happens often. So don't just assume that, oh, well, it's all my kids and, they're all together.
Yeah,
they're playing in the other room.
Oh, my goodness.
You got to do
I've
frequent pop-in visits.
So many stories of bigger brothers molesting little sisters,
Yep.
of older cousins molesting male cousins.
Step siblings.
Step siblings
That
is huge.
Absolutely
Yes,
huge.
it really is. It is.
And I'll say with that, combined with the internet, children with internet are introduced to violent sex, rape scenes and fantasies and all this kind of stuff at a very young age now. They don't need to be abused to develop these paraphilias at a young age anymore. So paraphilia is just it's a sexual preference that's outside of the norm. So weird fetishes and all these different things. And interestingly, sexual paraphilias are the number one predictor, more than anything else, the number of paraphilias that a pedophile has, the number of odd sexual fantasies that are outside of the norm, choking, foot fetishes, all these things that are outside of the normal range of sexual preferences. The more paraphilias you have, the more likely the chance of recidivism, that sex offender is going to be a repeat offender over and over and over, that it's almost guaranteed that they're going to wind up back in prison, that they're going to be a repeat offender.
It pains me when you're talking like this to think of young children discovering such pictures, scenes on the internet. And yet we know it happens where parents think they're doing something good by saying, well, here,
I'll give them a phone so I can stay in touch with them.
Right, exactly. And it's not monitored. And we have to be so careful.
And I'll say this too, because I think it's really important. I didn't write it down. I just thought of it. But, the number one most searched genre on Pornhub, the biggest free provider of pornography on the internet in the world, the number one genre, at least the year before the pandemic, I don't know what it is now, I don't know in the last year, but the number one searched for and consumed genre was the step brothers and sisters, step siblings having sex together. The number one search genre. So our young kids are driving the demand, not just young kids, I mean, adults are too, but you get these weird sexual fantasies and they're actually watching them on their devices. So it's no surprise that the number of sexual encounters, forced sexual encounters among siblings, and especially step siblings, it is really high.
When you think about it, in the
It's not good.
home, it's monitoring has to be of all different kinds, but there are things like running to the bathroom without clothes on. Running from the bedroom to the bathroom or the shower to the bedroom. And a child will, do that. Or parents think it's cute sometimes to just let a child run around without any clothes on. And you have other siblings around. And when they've viewed porn and their minds are already glittered with all the wrong stuff, when they view this, it's not just a little kid running from the bathroom to the bedroom to get dressed. It triggers a lot of stuff. So we have to be really, really careful. It starts with monitoring those devices. Please watch what your kids are watching.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, put filters on them.
Oh, my goodness.
Do random
Yes.
checks
Yes.
regularly.
Yes.
Pick them up, check search history. And keep in mind, too, kids are much smarter than us adults. They know how to hide things really well. Kids talk
We can
at
get
school.
these filters on. I'm not going to brag or anything, but honestly, on my phone and my iPad, if you try to get anything like that, it blocks it immediately. Everything's blocked. Everything. Because I have grandkids on my stuff.
Yeah,
I have them.
You'd be surprised, though. Kids know how to get by
They're
firewalls.
a lot smarter than I am. TikTok and all that good stuff.
They're pretty smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've really got to monitor. I mean,
Yes.
we have a policy in our home. Again, we'll talk more about this in the next
Yeah,
episode,
okay.
but it's the open door policy.
Right, and that's what I was getting at. Yeah.
And
no secrecy with the
devices are out in the open. We're in
right.
the same room.
Yep.
Et cetera. You got to be smart. Number 4, do you know where your spouse is when you sleep? Because pedophile abusers are cowards. They're creeps. They're sick. They're twisted. They're animals. They suck. What else can I say about them?
Yeah, just
They're idiots.
Evil is the word
because they're
that
the
I
cowards
use.
that they are.
Evil. Yes.
And they target little innocent children. Abusers frequently get up in the middle of the night. They go into kids' rooms and they sexually assault them. I can't tell you how often this happens, and abuse survivors know. So many abuse survivors tell these horror stories about daddy or stepdaddy or whoever. Somebody's staying over, a friend of the family is staying over at the house, and they walk into the room in the middle of the night while the kid's sleeping. Can you imagine? I can't even begin to imagine waking up to that horror hell scene. That's horrific.
Right. Well, it grieves my heart. It really does to think of this. And I know within our home, your dad and I were on different time zones, so to speak. I stayed up late quite often because that was my only hour or two before bed of quiet time.
Mm-hmm.
He would go to bed very early and get up what I called in the middle of the night, which it was. He was always up by 4 o'clock at the latest. Well, that's when I'm falling into a dead sleep. I'm in that dead zone. And you're right. Abuse happens during those hours right within the home.
Yeah.
And it is horrific. It is terribly horrific. And, the only way to stop that is for the husband and wife to, you need to monitor them, which, how sad is that? How sad is that?
I know.
It is.
And part of that might be an impossibility because of schedules, because of, you have deep sleepers and light
Right.
sleepers. I happen to be a conked out deep sleeper. I mean, there could be Jesus could come again, and I probably would miss the boat.
I'll make sure.
Be like, well, why isn't Jimmy in heaven? Well, Jesus came and he couldn't wake up.
Yeah.
I'm that deep of a sleeper, but there's another component to that. If you can't wake up, and just pop in and check on your spouse. You don't have to be
Exactly.
weird
Right.
about it, but just be
No.
like, hey, I noticed you weren't in bed. I wanted to see.
It's very
what you're-
sad that
what
we
you're up
have to
to.
think that way, but we do.
Yeah,
We
we do.
Yes, we
Um,
do.
But the other part of that too is to talk to your kids and say, is there anybody who makes you uncomfortable when you sleep? Is there anything talk to them in the mornings.
Well, here's what I could
make that a
have
regular
done
practice.
too, is most often in our bedrooms we have a corner where you can put a chair. Your dad always said he needed to get up to study. Had I had a brain that thought this way years ago, I would have said, well, you can study right here in the bedroom. I would have slept through it, but
Right.
knowing, that he was there and that had been practiced would have prevented him within the home from
Yeah.
having freedom.
Yeah. And I mean, this might seem like an extreme measure, but I don't think it's that extreme
It's
given
not.
given abuse is extreme, right?
Right.
So I don't think these
Yes.
precautions are that extreme. But we live in the age of technology, and cameras are getting better and better and
yeah.
cheaper and cheaper. If there's any question whatsoever, put cameras in your kid's room and just have that, and
I
have
think
motion
that's- Jimmy,
detected.
I don't think
motion
that's
detected
weird.
cameras.
I think that's smart.
Yeah.
In today's day and age, I don't think it's at all weird.
And I would say too, like, use that with extreme extreme ethics.
We're talking about yes.
I'm not talking about watching, going
Spying
through
children.
hours of
No,
footage of your kids
no,
sleeping, and again, don't be bizarre and weird
Yes,
about it, but
yeah.
like, have motion detected cameras where if it detects motion, it's only going to activate that camera. Like, maybe a kid is just tossing and turning.
Right.
So you might have just a little bit of footage that you can review and just go back and kind of glance at it. You'll find out really quickly if somebody's going in their room.
Well, I think that may prevent
Who doesn't belong
Jimmy,
there.
and our whole idea is to prevent before something happens. And the more ways we can let the abuser know
That's right.
that we are on our toes, that we are doing everything to prevent, to keep our children safe, the harder we make it for that person. And it's a good thing to do.
Well, and this is interesting too. I mean, and you're exactly right. Yeah. So, like, I don't want anybody to get the indication that I'm like, wait until somebody goes in the room and you review the footage and you're like, see, I caught you. Prevention is always the
Right.
best option. With that said, and with the cameras and letting abusers know, or not just abusers, just people know.
People.
It's just
People
it's
in
just common
general,
practice.
yeah.
Hey,
That
we
way-
have cameras in our home.
People need to stay out of our kids' bedrooms. Just stay out.
We
It's
have
our
cameras
child's
that
bedroom. Yeah.
we have
It's our
cameras that are in the
child- right.
bedrooms and or wherever.
We have cameras for entrances into our homes when we're away. I mean, we don't want people,
Right.
strangers entering. It's not weird to keep our children safe while they're sleeping.
Right. I think they at least deserve that. They deserve to sleep in
Yeah,
peace.
they do.
But I asked Dad one time. I wrote him when he was in prison, and I said, "Is there anything that would have scared you?" Because the stuff you write about, like, nothing intimidated him, nothing scared him. He was so brazen and arrogant and just abused in plain sight of all kinds of people, and didn't even think twice about it. I said, "Is there one thing that would scare the living crap out of you, that would actually stop you from abusing a kid?" And he wrote me back and he said, "Yep." He said, "Cameras." Video
I was gonna
cameras.
Say, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Now, whether he was being truthful or not,
I think he was.
I don't know.
I think
But
he was. Sure.
for him, and I guess it makes sense, but you don't want eyes seeing what you're doing.
Right.
Um,
Evil
Because the stakes are
works
high.
in the dark.
right.
You know that. So.
And then finally, number 5, do you monitor parties at your house? This is one that you actually brought up, and I think you have some great points. So,
Well, when we
Talk
have
about it.
kids' parties, I'm thinking, how many times that I myself hosted parties like that for your kids, and we'd have people coming and going, and there's always that one parent, or when abuse occurs, that likes to take a child by the hand and walk them to the bathroom, or take them in the other room to change their diaper, or that says to the other parent, hey, let me do that, let me take care, I'll go take them off, I'll quiet them,
take them on hikes.
yes, I'll take them for a walk,
I'll play games with them.
No, the party is here. You need to be here. There's going to be straggling parents. Keep your eyes open, people. Just keep your eyes open. These are kids. You're in charge of the kids. Keep them in plain sight, in front of you, at all times. Don't let them drift off with somebody else. That is a no-no, and we do that so often because we're weary. We get tired. We're in charge of the party. We don't want a crying child or whatever. And so we don't know who that person is. We don't know people. We need to use caution.
Well, and I'll say too, like, having parents stay around, I actually respect that. And we've had parents before that they'll drop their kids off, and we assume that all the parents are leaving because it's a kids' party, right? Well, there are parents that they've not given us reasons, and they don't need to. They don't know an explanation. If they want to stay with their kid, we've talked about this before, by all means.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm not going to be that parent that's like, this is a kid's party. You need to go.
No.
Because I think it's fair and it's good if parents want to be in their kids' lives, and if parents want to be there and monitor their own kids at somebody else's house, great. We welcome that at our house.
I always worried about the bathroom stuff, not even thinking about abuse, but children are very open with everything. They'll, if do you have to go potty? Yeah, and they'll drop their pants. And
boys especially.
I'm
gonna go water the tree.
Yep, I'm gonna. Yeah, and if it's like we need to be careful who our children are with. That's when you welcome the parent.
You welcome them, but you monitor them.
But
we don't ever let our kids' friends' parents take kids on their own.
No.
They're with us. We make sure we know where the parents are at all times. And I would say this too, it's not just parents. Sometimes it's a package deal. Sometimes older siblings come along.
Yeah. To babysit, to watch.
Or just because
just to hang out.
Yep.
They don't have a place
mom
to
or dad
go.
are there, and maybe they live far away and they don't have time to run home and come back, so they stay at your party. But
sounds like we've complicated things here. We've complicated parties and home life and all of that. We haven't. What we're saying is just be on your toes at all times. Do everything you can to monitor children in your home. It's vitally important because so much abuse happens within the confines of a home with people that we know and we love. And sadly, this is a fact. It's not the stranger at the mall who's going to take your child and grab your child and whisk them into the bathroom.
Right.
It's more likely grandpa who is going to walk that child, gently and tenderly into the bathroom and do some harm.
And I think of Mary DeMuth, her story, when she tells her story of childhood abuse, it's horrific. But,
it is.
In her case, babysitter would be laid out on the couch drunk, and the neighbor boys would come over from the next house over, and they would come in and they would, do horrific things.
Terrible.
While the babysitter's right there, and she would beg the babysitter, not to have these boys come over, and she'd discipline Mary, and the boys would still come over. So, she wasn't even safe in her own home with a babysitter there.
Right.
And I think, probably in the mind of the babysitter, well, why wouldn't you want the neighbor kids to come over and play?
Come play with you,
why
right.
sit at home alone and mope around when the neighbor kids want to come over and play with you? So, that leads us to our truth bomb, and you already said it.
Right.
Monitor activities at your house constantly. That should be the norm. We'll leave you with that. We thank you for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. Thank you to our patrons who make the podcast possible. If you found it helpful, please follow on Spreaker and search for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. If you believe in what we do, consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron and check out the cool rewards our patrons receive. Share with your friends and tell the world. Join us in speaking out on sex abuse so we can change the tides and prevent abuse.